A very, very big aloha. I'm Reverend Cindy Paulos here with one of my favorite people, Reverend Reg. So good to see you. This is the first time we've done a Zoom meeting together, and it's
Yes,
so lovely to see your face. Of course, it's hard with our time differences because I'm on Maui and you're in the Philippines. So,
yes. Aloha, Dr.
aloha.
Cindy.
And we were
Yes,
actually talking before we went in the room here and began to get started about, we were going to actually talk about um, my book, Sacred Spiritual Tools for a Better Life. But I said, no, you know what? We have to talk about the real meaning and the mystical and spiritual meaning of Christmas. So we just did a
awesome.
complete pivot, like, but it felt right. It just felt right. I said, you started talking about how it is there in the Philippines, celebrating Christmas. And of course, it's a little different here on Maui. And then there's the way we experience it, with an overview of the metaphysical point of view. So I'm really glad I can talk to you. You were mentioning it's a big deal in the Philippines, right?
Yes, it is a big deal in the Philippines. It goes for a really long time. It starts with September, October, November, and
Whoa.
even up to the second or third week of January. So the business sector and the people in the spiritual sector, they all have their own activities to get people excited about Christmas. And at the same time, it's also one of the biggest holidays that we have here in the Philippines because we're predominantly Catholics and Christians. And there's just so many Catholic churches here in the Philippines that celebrate Christmas.
Well, I know and you know how much, I love Mother Mary. And I had a visitation from Mother Mary, and I wrote the book, Mystical Mother Mary, Sacred Tools of Love. And of course, then of course you also were telling me about how, I think worldwide actually, when you think of Mother Mary, there's the rosary that said it, and Mother Mary is very, very much a part of the Catholic tradition. Was it that
Mm.
way with you, being raised there?
Oh, yeah. And the rosary was really a big deal to us, especially my parents would gather us every now and then when we were kids, maybe a couple of times every month to pray together. So there's a slogan in the Philippines that says, the family that prays together stays together. So that was one of the things that our parents would gather us for. And not that we were perfect kids, but they just wanted for us to have a collective experience as a family. And I fondly remember at the same time, my siblings and I, particularly my sister and I, we got so busy during Christmas working for our parents' small business.
Well, I just did a talk actually on Insight Timer about the hidden story of Mother Mary, because I really actually really honor and love the fact that the Catholics, appreciate Mary. If you go in churches anywhere in Europe, and I'm sure it's that way there in the Philippines, we don't have that many Catholic churches here in Hawaii. But when you go in the Catholic church, you will always see a statue or statues to Mother Mary, sometimes many pictures, maybe shrines, right? Um, so I'm glad that that's recognized. However, there was so much more to Mother Mary in a mystical sense and even in historical sense than sometimes is recognized, because she was a powerful, amazing woman who, every time I hear that song, that song, I wonder if she did she know, Mother Mary is a song about her saying, did Mary know, and I keep saying, yes, Mary knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't like sometimes she's portrayed as just this young innocent woman who's very faithful, and all of a sudden the angel comes and she, and she's pregnant and has Jesus. But no, she was a master. She was, an enlightened being. She was someone
Mhm.
who was raised as an Essene, with
Wow.
knowing she was, they knew that she was raised with that ability to have union, a cosmic consciousness, enlightenment, and union with God. And so this wasn't something that was done easily. This is done with practice, with prayer, with meditation. In her setting, that she was a vegetarian. The Essenes did not eat meat at all. They were all very, very spiritual, separate from the Jewish community. So she knew what she was doing, and so did Joseph. Joseph knew too about what was going on, and she also knew before Jesus was born what his destiny was, that he was here to enlighten mankind, and that she also knew that he would die at a young age. So she knew all of those things, which actually makes her much more, to me, of an amazing person, to be able to have that gift and also know and carry that burden all her life, knowing that she was bringing this master in that was going to change the world and at the same time was going to die at a young age in doing so. So,
Amazing.
yeah, I mean, she was amazing. She still is amazing because she ascended just as Christ ascended. When she ascended, she was ascending with a total light body, where she's now, considered to be the queen of heaven. I was listening to Christmas Carol. They said Jesus will be the king of heaven. Well, she's the queen of heaven. So Mary was, I think, a role model for anyone on the mystical or metaphysical path, and she has been for me. But on top of that, let's talk about Christ and Christ consciousness and the birth. You brought up an interesting thing about how you celebrate the baby
Yeah.
Jesus. Tell me how that's celebrated there.
First, every Christmas, I remember when we were kids, there's a manger and people would reenact what happened during Christmas. And what makes my mom's shrine, their place of worship, special is because they have uh, this Santo Nino figure, which is supposed to be the little Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And people have a devotion to the Santo Nino because they think that they believe that the Santo Nino is another intercessor for their prayers.
Ah,
So it's a huge deal for a lot of different provinces here in the Philippines, Cebu, Manila, and also Tacloban, where I actually came from. Because now I'm based in Manila, which is the city, but Tacloban is actually a provincial address before it was declared a city. So in those areas, they consider the Santo Nino as a powerful intercessor for their prayers. And I want to ask you, Dr. Cindy, so how
mm-hmm.
do we now balance that? Because we know from Dr. Masters, we keep talking about God's power and presence within. And then now we're talking about Mama Mary and then the Santo Nino. And we know from different traditions, they also have their own understanding of intercessors. So, how does that come into play of our spirituality without people losing their understanding of the God within presence?
Well, what I first I'm going to relate what just occurred to me as you were speaking, which I'd never really quite put the two and two together of the baby Jesus and how it's an intercessor. I'd never heard of that as an intercessor, someone that you could go to. But when you think of the heavenly look in any baby's beautiful eyes and presence, there's that always that feeling of just coming from heaven and purity. And truly, you look in a child's baby's face and you always smile. I mean, you get really that amazing feeling. So any child has that heavenly aspect, right? I think. But if you look at the power of the incarnation of the Christ consciousness, that Christ light, that indeed Jesus Christ came in as a master, knowing what his purpose was, not as a mistake, but knowing what he was doing to be a person who could be a living example of how we all can live in a higher state of consciousness and be aware of Christ consciousness. So if you can imagine that baby Jesus and the power and energy that he had coming in, um, that would indeed be that amazing purity and energy of coming right from the highest place of heaven, God consciousness from the source to earth. And we can all celebrate the birth of that Christ, that baby, that young inner
Mhm.
child, that beautiful innocence of that being that we are inside that is so wonderful and so joyous and so pure that we all have within us, before we start to get jaded and upset and depressed by
Yes.
life. And I think this last year or 2 years has actually put a lot of damper and clouds over everyone's faith and hope, and it's been sad to see people be so depressed and darkened by what's going on in the world. And I think maybe if we could bring a little of that magic of that Christ, that inner Christ, and let at this time, at the darkest time of the year, the darkest, shortest, by actually, we're doing this the day before. Where you are, it actually may be the solstice. The winter solstice is the shortest day of the year and the least amount of light. And that's at the time that we need to let that Yule log, that fire, that spirit, that Christ be born again in us, which is having the hope, having the light, having that love that is part of the unity of Christ consciousness that we all can experience, to let that be born in us, this
Cindy.
Christmas time, that beauty that you are, that amazing power that you hold.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Cindy, because honestly, also for my generation, as millennials, you want to find how logical things are. Why are we doing this? So there's always a question like that. And then I was reading an article by some scientists, and about 10 years ago, I think they came up with a new field of study, which they call neurotheology.
Hmm.
And the scientist wanted to find out, is there any difference if somebody who has longer prayer practice prays for you and you as an individual who's just beginning to have a prayer practice? So he had brain scanners to check if there was any difference, and why do we need all these pastors and other teachers to help you uplift your consciousness when you feel very limited in the moment. And then he said he realized that a particular region of the brain activated more and lit up more in the brain scanner compared to the one who was just beginning to get into the practice. So I was thinking to myself now that it's probably the reason why certain spiritual communities or religious communities have other people pray with them, because they're still getting into the rhythm of what it means to be one with that power and presence within, that is part of their prayer essentially, because we know that when you pray, you're part of the prayer, and you're also supposed to have that guidance and divine right action after you lift up your intention to your concept of higher being who's going to help you with whatever it is that you'd like answered.
Well, I
And
go I go into my book, Spiritual Tools, as you know, for a Better Life. I go into prayer, and I talk about it, as you know, in a metaphysical sense. And in a metaphysical sense, it's interesting because I think maybe more than ever, when I go on social media, and I know you're on social media a lot. I mean, every day I'm seeing people asking for prayers. Every day there are people. I mean, I have a long list of people who are asking for prayers. And so I know you see that too. And I sometimes wonder, when someone puts that little prayer emoji, what they're doing. Are they just putting an emoji up and just saying, "Oh gosh, I hope you're okay," or are they really praying? And are they
yeah,
maybe just sending positive energy, like you would like a smile to someone, or are they really connecting inside themselves, connecting with that highest source, with God, or the one source, or the universal consciousness, or the one light? Are they going to that source and asking God, or whatever you wish to call it, God to help the person for the highest good. And this is the hardest part that people don't understand. Sometimes what we want, for people, we always want no one to suffer. We don't want anyone to die. I mean, really, if it was up to us, I think we'd never see anyone dying. We'd have all these people that are thousands of years old on the planet because we don't want them to die. But, that's not part of the plan, of course. We don't know what the best is for any other soul. Even as we may want for ourselves the best for them, we don't know if it's their time to go. And that indeed, maybe they have something much more important that's much better for them in some other dimension. And this is hard for some people to understand. But that higher source, the one source of all, God knows. And so when you pray for the highest good, you don't insert your will and direct that prayer towards the person, but you ask God to bring them the highest good. And the power of that is so much stronger than anything we could do if we just thought of the person and sent them a prayer direct. So when we pray, we pray for the highest good for people. And I mean, I have to go back to Jesus Christ and him knowing at that time that he had to go through the process, and Mary knowing at the time, and Mary Magdalene knowing at the time that he was going to have to go through that process. And we go and think about
Mhm.
he could have easily, with the power that he had, not allowed himself to die. He could have spoke up for himself when he was asked to speak up for himself, but he knew that wasn't the highest purpose. And he stopped everyone from that happening. He actually allowed himself because he knew that was part of what the plan was. So, that's the hardest thing for us to accept sometimes. The joy of Christmas, the Christ being born, and then realizing
Mhm.
that Christ that's born here at this time in us at the darkest time can indeed be a Christ consciousness that lives forever, because that light that is from the Christ, that light that is there in you, that's born at the darkest time, can live forever and does live forever and is eternal. Once you connect with your soul, you realize you've had many, many lives. This is just your
Mhm.
incarnation this time around. You chose this way to be for some reason, lessons you needed to learn. And, you can indeed then start to realize what a blessing it is we don't live forever, that we get a
Yeah.
chance to go back to the light from where we came, that light that you see in baby Jesus' eyes when it's there in the nativity scene, the light of that perfect energy. We get to return to that. And it's probably a
Mhm.
good thing, because by the time we get on this earth for a little while longer, we start to have issues with health and stuff like that. And then we go and
Mhm.
start all over again and go back to the source and go to the highest light that is there, without the form, the spirit. We're just spirit here in form. And we forget that.
Exactly.
We forget that so often, right?
Yeah, and that's why I'm actually enjoying this conversation because we both know that before there was any form of religious branding, we just all came from spirit.
Right.
And because of human evolution, so that we can work more harmoniously and in an orderly way, religion had to be the consequence of that order because we're gonna have a deeper faith and confidence with each other when we know each other's collective values. And that's why I think, Dr. Cindy, when Jesus Christ mentioned greater things than I you will do, it
Yes.
wasn't devoid of any common sense. I think Jesus was also talking about common sense in the in the situation because, for example, one of the things that I really love about Jesus miracles was how he multiplied the loaves and the fish.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was a kid, I used to think that, wow, there Jesus really multiplied the loaves and the fish, and there's light coming out, and then there's the multiplication of the loaves and the fish the way I see it on TV. But then historians were saying when Jesus lifted up the loaves and the fish, something in the inner consciousness of the attendees of his class shifted, and they realized that if the master was sharing whatever little resource he had the rest of the people who were attending his class decided, hey, I also have some. Maybe I should also share mine.
Yes.
And then when they realized that they all had something to share, there was no lack and limitation.
Beautiful.
And it's the same
Beautifully,
thing.
beautifully, beautifully said. That's wonderful. Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
true. And you know, another reason I love Christmas is because we get to talk about this. Um, I'm doing a Christmas album here. I've never done a Christmas album before, but I'm working on it right now. And someone said, well, you know, some people don't like Christmas and some people are sick of Christmas songs. And it's like, yeah, well, for me, it gives me a chance to talk about Christ, and it gives me the
Mhm.
chance to bring in the energy of that beautiful rebirth that we know happens when you discover Christ and Christ consciousness. And
Yeah.
and there's not a lot of times where people bring that power and energy. And I'm sorry that, and I know Dr. Master very well. You know, I knew him so well because he was my stepfather, and I spent a lot of time talking with him. And he was not happy when it became politically correct and people started saying happy holidays. Um, and he was very strong about that. When he was very strong, and it's like, well, why are you saying happy holidays? What's wrong with saying Merry Christmas, you know, or Happy Christmas? Um, and I understand, you know, what people don't want to offend anyone. I do understand that. And holidays does say holy days. And if you want to
Mhm.
water it down to holy days, well, gosh, and take it seriously that these are holy days, you know,
Yeah.
rather than holidays. But but there is an opening that happens because we are, as our society, in some of the darkest times. We are really going through a darkness, like I think happened when Jesus came to earth that first time. We're going through those challenging times now, and we really need that light. We really need that love more than ever before. We really do. We need the hope. We need the joy. We need so much of that now after what we've gone through for the last couple of years. And if we can use the reason of Christmas to bring that to people, and to me, that's a really good thing. Now, we know
Mhm.
that Christ wasn't born in December. We know that the religions made it happen at that time because that was the Yule log and that was a pagan tradition. We know that. We know that
Mhm.
indeed a lot of things were taken and moved, you know, and changed. But there
Mhm.
was a star, there was a supernova that came
Wow.
before the birth of Christ that lit the sky for like 70 days, that got brighter and
Wow.
brighter. And they astronomically know that there was a supernova that could have been followed. And Dr. Masters always talks about that the three wise men were three masters. They were magi, they were masters. They weren't just wise men, they were masters, okay? These were enlightened beings that were following that star. And that star is still present and possible for us to connect to. The light of that star was the energy from the highest place. And I think it was
Mhm.
Venus that also was combined in that energy. But that light, I've been connecting with the star energy, and I've been writing poems that my next Christmas CD will be about. That we can't underestimate that star of wonder, because when we look to the stars, we realize we're not alone, that there is
Mhm.
magic and that we're one with the universe, and the stars actually have a sound and a tone and an energy, and they were that song and that sound and that tone and that energy of that star enlightened, brought the enlightened energy, was present in that energy when Christ was born. And that energy that came forth that night was an energy of light that changed the world. So I feel so strongly about this that I really, I always go out in the morning wherever Reg. I go out first thing when I wake up, and I go up and look at the stars, and I connect
Amazing.
with the stars. I always put my hands up and I bring in the energy of the stars and I see what comes to me, because we then are connecting with the higher energy of the universe and the stars and the light behind the stars, which that light that lights the stars is the light that is the light of Christ, the light in you, the light of your soul, the light of God that we can connect with in meditation and in what we do. And As you know, it's not just connecting in meditation, but then it's bringing it to work in our life, in our everyday life, which is the hardest part, which Jesus Christ did so well. He showed us the example of how we can share that love in our life. And those parables he spoke were so deep that they can be taken on many levels, as you know, and you were just expressing it beautifully. Um, so I never want people to underestimate that light and that love present at this time or any time when someone goes and connects with the stars and connects with their inner self and connects with that inner Christ within. It's so powerful and it's so beautiful. I mean, it really is. You know that.
Yeah, and at the same time, I also want to highlight Dr. Cindy because briefly, I want to mention the Harvest Convention because today, for
Yes.
some reason, we just received the posters from the states of the ones we recognized here in the Philippines. And one of my intentions for the Harvest Convention was to bring into play a family culture where we can be anywhere in the world but feel like family, feel that warmth. And one of the things that's very important to me was to recognize people who were exceptionally good at what they do, but they never lose their side where they're compassionate for others. Because it's not easy to have that rational thinking brain, but at the same time, be fully connected to your heart. And as far as I was concerned, the people that I recognized had a balance of both. And the reason why to me it's so important because I think if we really go back through history, it wasn't just a lesson of who's right and who's not. It was a lesson about how do we work together as a team, as a global family. We don't want our biases to get in the way of our soul's evolution. And we know that when we talk about evolution, it's not like just one soul is evolving. Even the rest of the community is evolving as
Yes.
well.
Yes, it's true.
And the reason why I think we're now in the situation where the internet is so open is so that there's going to be more room for collaboration. There's going to be more room for win-win situations. It doesn't have to be you win, I lose kind of situation now
Right.
because we know that intelligence makes itself manifest to those who are open to it and receptive to it so that we can work together as a team and not antagonize each other because we work together better when we're just open and receptive to each other's light like what you've mentioned. And it's such a beautiful metaphor that you mentioned, and I'm very sure that scientists can explain it in a very uh, in a more logical way why you would do that every morning and why you feel so uplifted and inspired and why you were so open to ideas like that. And
Well,
it's
I don't know
funny
about
because
science, but I'll tell you one thing. I was very blessed to have a mother who told us from the time we were born on that we were star children. She would look at me and says,
wow.
"You're a star child." She would say that, right? And I hadn't even thought of that till you said that. But she believed that. Of course, she met Dr. Masters, and that's how I started metaphysics when I was about 13. And then she later married him. But she always connected. She saw that star children. We are connected to the stars. And you know what's amazing, Rev Reg? I have to say, you talked about the millennials and generations, and I think that there's such a power now with so many people thinking about traveling to space that there's such an importance that you and others are going to play in having the right spiritual integrity as we travel into outer space, that we do not carry any of our negative bias or way we've mistreated the earth, but that we go into outer space understanding the spiritual importance of that journey as well. I mean, I love the fact that there's so many movies and science fiction things being written about traveling, but I don't know how many cover the spiritual importance of traveling. And I was just listening to Dr. Masters talk. I broadcast on the station I program, KUOS or inspirationalradio.net, and his Christmas talk, which I'll be running again. He talks about the further you go into inner space, the farther you can go into outer space. And I just
Mhm.
heard it, and I've listened to these talks over and over again, but I just heard him go with that. And I went, wow, isn't that interesting? The further we go into our inner space, the farther we can go into outer space. And isn't it interesting? We're evolving and going further and further within, and we are now going further and further into the outer space as well.
Yeah, it's true. And at the same time, you talked about spiritual integrity. And to me, one of the things that I don't want to lose as someone who's part of this generation is the genuine human connection. I don't like the idea where I'm just passing people by. Last year, when I had the show Perspective, it was you and Stephen Simon who were my first two guests for that podcast. And then Stephen mentioned to me, I didn't think that you will keep in touch this long because it's been a year since we had that interview. And I just realized for myself, I don't want to lose my humanity where here I am. I'm so focused on achieving more, interviewing more people, and then you lose sight of other people, especially just because you're moving so fast and then you're forgetting your connection. Because it's so important to me to feel that I'm part of a bigger family where I don't feel lonely because you feel disconnected with other people.
Stephen was, I did the first interview with him on the radio, and then I know I gave the connection to Jennifer Hill on that, and I'm glad you got connected because he's amazing. He's an amazing man.
Yeah.
And his work is actually very enlightened work that he does, and I'm so glad he did that book. I mean, that's an example of someone going through such pain, but at the same time connecting and bridging with spirit with what he's going through in his life, and it's so beautiful. So he's a special man. I know so many people at Christmas time actually have a difficult time, and I just want to send our energy and light and love to the world and those who feel lonely, who have maybe lost loved ones. And I say the word lost in quotations because I don't believe you ever really lose anyone because the spirit they're there, but you certainly feel the pain of not having their presence in your life. So for the people who've gone through what he has, um, and for the people who have experienced so much in these last years or two, I mean, if you just take a time at Christmas to light a candle and maybe write a letter, because in spirit
Mhm.
that energy's felt. Write a letter to the person, the loved one that may have passed on, or is suffering in some way. Um, that's what the good intention of Christmas, magic that can happen. And we send them all our love, and all of our light for those who have going through a difficult time over these last few years, and so many have, that. That I pray this Christmas some of the magic in that light and the love of Christ Mass, of Christ's energy, the Christ being born in them, that spirit connects them to that energy of love and light and brings some of the magic of that spirit of Christmas present in their lives. And maybe you and they can go up and look up at the stars and feel a little of that magic that happens when you are connected to the light in the stars, to the song of the stars, to the song that I know was sung on the night that Christ was born. And we're out of time, and I just am so glad we opened up and threw away the playbook and just went with went with a totally different subject than we were going to start to talk about. But I'm really glad that we did
Everything is
because
in the
you know it was kind of meant to be. So we'll do have to do another one sometime on the other subjects. But people can find you. Why don't you tell people how they can find you, Rev?
Yes, please visit www.reverendreg.com and send me an email through rr@reverendreg.com. Yeah.
Okay. And I'll put that up. And I'm wishing you a very, very, very holy, special, blessed Christmas full of light and that Christ energy in you that shines so beautifully forth that helps so many people. I say thank you for all that you've done and all the support you've always given. You've been a wonderful friend and support, and I'm so glad we connected. And I just wish you the best this Christmas. So a very, very holy Merry Christmas and a beautiful New Year to you, Rev.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cindy. And likewise, I know one of the reasons why I always have that harvest mindset, it's because whatever seeds you plant, there's definitely going to be a harvest. And personally, for me, the way Christmas touches my heart is what am I meant to do in this lifetime? And to me, it's always resonated with me to bring it down in very practical terms, especially some of my trainings in unity. It's always been a balance of where is your spirituality taking you in terms of how effective you are at handling your practical life.
Yes,
It's one of the teachings of Charles Fillmore that I really really
absolutely.
resonated with.
Yes.
Yeah.
He was a master. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and thank you, Dr. Cindy, for
Thank
having me. So
you.
I don't
My
know what happened.
namaste,
Satnam,
Satnam, and
aloha.
Allah, and Merry Christmas. Aloha.
All right.